Hi and welcome to Ask GMBN Tech, the weekly Q&A session. Get your questions in for next week's show down there. Use the hashtag Ask GMBN Tech, and if there's a question we want to answer, we'll answer it. First question comes from Weist, and he says, Clipless, can't we start calling them clips? Well, yeah, it's a very good point. I guess some people do. I guess the story, you know what it is clearly if you're asking this. It dates back a long time back to clips and straps, and whether you're running clips and straps or not. So yeah, I'd say clips or flats rather than clipless, even though I'll probably say clipless, but I do agree with you. Yeah, very good point. Jim Strachan says, can you help please? I've emailed Specialized a couple of times, but no response. I have a Specialized Rock Hopper Expert 29er, the 2021 model. I've replaced the 100mm fork with a straight steerer and a 120 tapered fork. I used the Hope bottom cup, headset cup that is, to accommodate the tapered fork. Good hack that. The 100mm fork has had 46mm offset and the 120 has 51mm offset. The bike rides great now. Will the warranty be void, and is the new setup likely to cause damage to the frame? Well, to be fair, it sounds like a great hack, and some brands, I've got to say, are funny with things like fork travel. They will give you an excuse to void the warranty. So I'm just going to read you, in fact, I'm going to throw it on screen. This is what the UK warranty says. This will differ depending on where you're based. But for example, it says, what is not covered by warranty? They say, warranty is void under the following circumstances and does not apply to damage caused by improper assembly or installation, crash, neglect, repair, improper maintenance or abnormal, excessive, improper use, improper alteration or installation of components, parts or accessories not originally intended to be compatible with the product. So to me, it sounds like they might not honour a warranty, but from my experience working in the bike trade for a long time and my experience in having many broken bikes previous to that, I would say you're very much in the hands of the actual warranty officer, person, whoever, technician that's actually dealing with your bike. You've got to remember, they're human beings. Yeah? They're not just working for a corporation, they're faceless. Everyone working in the bike industry is working there because they love bikes. And sometimes you're going to get, if you're in that position, you're going to get, I was just riding along, and you get a snapped bike. It's like, really? You were dirt jumping it, or you did something you shouldn't do? In which case they're going to be like, no. You're not going to get warranty on this, but sometimes you're going to get a case like this where you've done something like it's actually a really sensible hack to try and get more out of your bike. I don't see a problem with what you've done to your bike, but like I said, it will be down to the actual person that would deal with warranty in that case, and as Specialized say on their policy, they've got a clause to get out of it. So be interested to know actually if anyone has any warranty issues from doing things like this, because it is nice to know what you've got away with, what you haven't got away with, if you've learned any lessons. And just in the comments underneath, or sort of section underneath the video, we're going to throw the global warranty policy for Specialized and that UK warranty outline, so you can actually have a read through those. But definitely it is worth considering things like this before you go putting forks on with too much travel on a bike. But for the record, going from 100mm to 120mm, it really isn't going to stress the frame that much. And it is something I'd be comfortable doing on my own bike, but that's not to suggest that other people out there should do it. So it is something, if you're concerned about, don't do it. But nice hack, by the way. Next up from Justin. My full sus bike's been sat in my shed all winter here in Canada. Is there anything I need to do to the suspension before taking it out for its first ride? Taking a guess, your Canada winter is a lot colder than ours, so what I'd probably suggest is bringing it into your house and get it to sort of room temperature first. The oil might have got a bit thicker inside the shock and inside the fork there. Something you might also want to do when the bike comes back to sort of room temperature, flip it upside down. This works especially well for the fork, so any lower leg lube that's still in there, once it gets runny enough, it will go down to the bushings and hopefully make its way to the seals, compress the fork a number of times, and you'll soon find out if it's going to have a good action or not. And at this point you might see whether you need to do things like a fork lower leg service or a shock air can service. It might be absolutely fine, depending on the condition it was before the winter. But at this point you'll know that. So another little speedy way, without having to do a fork lower leg service, you can make the fork feel a bit nicer. I mean, I reckon the shock will probably be all right, but the fork tends to suffer more because of the huge telescopic nature of them. They ingest moisture and muck over the time of riding. So what you can do is get some suspension-friendly lube or some sort of silicone spray, spray it on a rag, or hold the rag around the fork there so you don't spray it near discs. Spray it onto the stanchion tube, just wipe it around a bit, press the fork a number of times, and it might lift out any dirt and stuff that's immediately under the seals and can help them feel a bit nicer. But generally, bikes tend to be pretty good in storage, but I'm not familiar with extreme temperatures. In fact, it is something that I was chatting to Anna about the other day, about looking into doing a sort of a cold weather, the opposite of a sunshine shoot, like a cold shine shoot, just to learn a bit more about this stuff, because we're just not exposed to temperatures that bad here in the UK. But there you go, hopefully that helps. Next up's from Alco. Hey Doddy and Anna, I can wiggle my cassette. Very nice. A little play is common, but I feel it's a bit too much. I can wiggle it left to right, but not up and down. The lock ring is tight. Can I do something to eliminate or reduce the wiggle? P.S. I like the new Duo presentation a lot. Hey Alco, yeah, so I'll let Anna know, that's great. Yeah, super easy to work with and argue with, like all that stuff, it's all good. So it's great having another member on the team. Now for the cassette, when you're wiggling it, so you've got to be sure that there's two things at hand here. So the cassette body that the cassette mounts onto, that can sometimes have a little play just in the nature of the way they work. So you need to look really closely to see if the whole cassette is moving on the body or if the body itself is moving, making it look like the cassette is moving. Now, if the actual cassette is moving on the body, there's a very good chance you've missed out one of the tiny spacers. Now, it could be one of the ones in between the sprockets, and that will make it very obvious because one of the sprocket, or two of the sprockets will be closer together than the rest of them, so you can see that visually. If it's not them, on some model hubs, you need a teeny little spacer. It's like something like a 2mm spacer, if that, behind the cassette. Just in order for the lock ring to tighten. So if that's the case, that is what you're missing, and it will be a case of popping to your local bike shop to try and get one of those spacers. Good luck. Next up, from Mail, are 2x group sets dead? I noticed recently that many bikes are not compatible with the front mech anymore. Even since the release of Shimano's XTR group set that included the 2x option, 2838 by 1045, 3 years ago, I've never seen a mountain bike brand launching a bike fitted with it. Can you name one or tell me why? I think they still largely have a place in mountain bike. Do you know what? I saw this question and I actually did have a look into this. It's really hard to find bikes with 2x on, full stop. So I've seen the Trek. In fact, there's a Trek bike here. So this one is a Marlin and also a Cube. This one is, I think it's a Tension. A couple of bikes basically I spotted. But yeah, it's really difficult to find bikes with a 2x on. Now, putting yourself in a position of the manufacturer, speccing less components on a bike, it costs you less, it makes the bike simpler to make, it's a win-win situation. So you can kind of understand why that is happening. From a consumer perspective, all right, some people will still want that. But going with the majority, unfortunately, I think many people would prefer the simplicity of having a single chainring up front and multiple on the rear. And if you're new to bikes, it makes it much easier to understand which gear to be in. Remember the days of like running 3 on the front and multiple chainrings on the rear? Trying to explain to someone that they work opposite ways round and you have to have constant chain tension and you're looking for the correct chain line, that can be quite confusing and intimidating. It's not to suggest that I don't agree with those existing, but yeah, it's definitely becoming a more difficult thing. Anyone else out there got a bike recently in the last few years that has a double or even a triple on there? I'd be interested to know, let us know. Next up from the boss of bread. My strap wrench keeps slipping on my shock body and my shock won't loosen up to service it. I've cleaned both the wrench and the shock. Ooh, this sounds bad. And I've also left some sticky residue from duct tape and it still slips. Any ideas? Other than try harder, the best thing I could suggest is look at the way that you're doing it. Now, I mean that in no disrespect, just consider a few different things. If you're trying it off the bike, consider trying it on the bike because the eyelets are held firmly at both ends. So if there's any movement there that can be resisting it, at least the only sort of movement you're going to be making will be onto that shock hand. Obviously check that you're doing it the correct way. Check that you've let out all of the air first. If there's some air remaining in there, then that's going to be fighting you, basically putting pressure internally against those threads. So that can make it difficult, and not only the fact, make it a bit dangerous as well when you're undoing it. So try doing it in the frame. If you've tried doing it in the frame, try removing it, putting it in a vise. Obviously use soft close jaws on there to basically protect the eyelets of the shock there, and try it again. Now, you're kind of on your own here. You're going to have to figure this out. It will open. You will be able to do that because it should never have been done tight enough in the first place. So do take care. You don't want to strip anything. You don't want to hurt yourself at all. Try rubber gloves as well. Sometimes you can get a better purchase with those than you can by using a strap wrench. Let us know how you get on. Good luck with that. Bike enthusiast. Hi GMBN team. Can I use e-bike chain lube on a normal mountain bike? Thanks in advance. Yeah, of course you can. A lube's a lube, technically. But the e-bike lubes have got a product in called boron nitride, I think I'm saying that right. And now essentially this is designed under high load torque or consistent high load torque to keep the lube in place longer. Now this is both a great thing, but what you might notice with this is it does tend to attract a little bit more gunk onto the chain. With a wet lube, it's not that much of an issue because the lube is so good at keeping the chain clean once it's on. It's the outside bits that attract the stuff. So if that bothers you, then you might not want to do it. But I have used the stuff on both bikes, no problem. What I have noticed with using the e-bike lube on a conventional bike is it does last longer, but it does get dirtier. So kind of a trade-off there. But yeah, there you go. I mean, I prefer dry lube, full stop anyway, and I'd rather clean my chain more and put more lube on rather than use a wet lube. I try to keep things as clean as possible. Next up, and actually last question this week, is from Jean Oxford. With so much change to mountain bike geometry the last few years, should I set up my road bike differently to match more? I feel like my saddle's too far back and the cleats too far forward. Maybe a crossover with GMBN Tech for this one. Well, I'd say you need to set up both your bikes for their specific purpose as a priority. But I do understand the need to make your bikes feel the same so you can jump between them. And when it comes to cleat position, if you're using, say, on a gravel bike, your cross-country shoe, and then the same shoe on your mountain bike, changing your position is just a bit unnecessary, and you risk rounding off those little 4mm bolts as well. Now, if I use myself as an example here, so I've got trail shoes and cross-country shoes. My trail shoes, I tend to have the cleat really far back, so it mimics a bit more the sort of position you'd have on a flat pedal, so it's more focused on the dynamic position on the bike, whereas my cross-country shoes, the cleat is further forward, so a bit more of a traditional position, and it's under the ball of my foot, so arguably a slightly more efficient position for pedaling, which is, I guess, what you might be considering here. But then the saddle position has changed as well, so I guess you could say saddle positions as much as feel as outright fit on a mountain bike versus on a road bike, it has to be perfect because the duration of time that you're spent in that saddle and how crucial it is to not basically injuring your knees, getting the correct power down. Now, for decades, I've had my saddle slammed all the way forwards on mountain bikes, mainly because I have my saddle really high because I'm a tall guy, and the other reason, of course, is because many bikes had slack seat angles. But now, because the seat angles have come up, I've in turn started moving my saddle slightly further rearwards to compensate. So not a bad thing. But be interested to know, actually, is anyone else out there riding between two different categories, like road and mountain bike, how much different your sort of saddle position and your cleat position is? I don't ride a road bike currently, so I don't have that issue, but I would say you want your bikes to be perfect for what you're using them for, if possible, but that might create a headache with your shoes. I feel like that's something that could go a bit further. Maybe I'll have a chat with Alex and Ollie over on GMBN Tech and see what they would do in the same position, and we'll come back to you on that. Thanks for the great questions, everyone. Let us know what you think in the comments underneath. Don't forget to get your questions in for next week's show, and we'll see you soon. Ta-ra.